sole survivor of a wagon train massacre. A Lakota chief found her and gave her a home again. The horse smelled her before I did. Wagon, my gray, the one I'd ridden 11 years and trusted more than most men, he stopped on the ridge and pulled his ears forward and stood without moving. I read him the way I'd always read him. Not fear, something else, something that needed deciding. It was late in the moon of falling leaves. Cold had settled into the breaks. I was 3 days out from camp, checking the line of the river bend where the Wasatch cattlemen had been pushing their herds past the agreed boundary, not to fight, just to look, to count, to bring back something true to my people instead of rumor. I had done this kind of work for 20 years, watching, carrying the weight of what I saw. Wagon moved first. He picked his way down the draw without being asked, and I let him. She was in a dry wash at the bottom, pressed into the cut bank wall, knees pulled to her chest. She had her arms wrapped around herself and her eyes were open, but she was not seeing anything in front of her. She was somewhere else, somewhere that had happened to her. I got down slow, made no sound beyond what I had to. She did not move when I landed on the ground, did not flinch when Wagon nosed the air near her. I crouched 10 feet away and waited. There was blood on her right side, dried dark on the fabric. A cut on her temple, long healed to rust. Her boots were gone, both of them, just her stockinged feet on the hard ground and one stocking torn through at the heel. Her dress had been gray once, maybe blue-gray, and now it was the color of the wash itself. She was alive, breathing, but only barely present. I waited. After a while she blinked. Her eyes moved, found me. She did not scream. I had expected screaming. A white woman alone in the breaks, finding a Lakota man crouched 10 feet away. There were things that could happen in that first second that could not be undone. I had seen it before. Fear turned into something that hurt people. She looked at me and said nothing. I said in her language. I had learned it the hard way, the way you learn anything that costs you. I said, "You are hurt." She looked down at her side like she'd forgotten about it, like it was something that had happened to someone else. I said, "Where are the others?" She turned her head toward the east, very slowly, the way you turn when the answer is something you cannot put into a full word yet. Just the direction, just that. I had come through the east that morning following the river. I had not seen any wagon train, but I had seen the ravens. 50, maybe 60 of them working something 3 miles back off the main trail, down in the meadow that opened up past the cottonwood stand. I had filed it away. Thought it was a deer, maybe a buffalo calf, something that had gone down in the night. I understood her gesture now. I did not press her. There was nothing to press toward. Whatever was east of us was done. I untied my blanket from behind the saddle and set it on the ground between us. Then I stood and walked to Wagon and busied myself with the cinch, giving her the chance to take the blanket without it being a transaction, without having to receive anything from my hands directly. When I looked again, she had pulled it around her shoulders. Her name was Clara. I learned this 3 days later, when she had eaten enough and slept enough and come back enough from wherever she had gone to tell me small things. It came out first as part of a sentence she was having in her head that spilled out loud, her mouth moving before she remembered where she was. And the sentence was something like, "Clara, don't you sit down in the cold." And then she stopped and looked at me and her eyes went clear for a moment and she said, "That's my name. Clara." I told her mine. She tried it, got close. I told her she could call me what her tongue could manage and I would know who she meant. She almost smiled at that. Almost. Those first days I had a choice to make. I could take her to the nearest Wasatch settlement. There was a trading post at the river fork, maybe 2 days' ride, run by a man named Hedrick who traded fair and kept a clean enough place. I could leave her there. That would have been the sensible thing, the expected thing. I did not do the sensible thing. I had looked at her sleeping. We were camped in a hollow that first night, fire kept small, and she had gone down hard and fast the way exhausted animals do. And I had watched and thought about the trading post in Hedrick and what would happen to a lone woman with nothing. No wagon, no family, no money, arriving in that country with only the clothes she had, and I made a different decision. I made the decision I would have wanted someone to make for me, once, a long time ago, when there had been a different kind of ruin in my life. When I was the one who needed someone to look at the situation and decide not to take the sensible road. We rode toward my people. I want to be honest about what that was. My camp was not a place where a Wasichu woman would find easy welcome. There were men in my band who had lost family to Wasichu soldiers, a lot of them more every year. There were women who looked at anything pale-skinned and went flat-eyed and turned away. There were children who had been taught to fear, because fear was sometimes the thing that kept them alive. I was not bringing Clara somewhere she would be comfortable, not right away, not by a long measure. What I was bringing her was safety, and food, and walls against the wind. The rest would have to be earned by her and by me both, and I knew that, and I did not know if I had the standing to earn it, or if she had the heart for what it would cost her. She did. She did, and I should have guessed it from the way she had looked at me in that wash, without screaming. But you do not know someone from one moment. You know them from 100 small moments stacked up over weeks and months. You know them by watching them do the hard things when doing the hard things is the only option left. The first morning in camp she was given a place in the lodge of my cousin Winona, who did not speak to her and did not look at her and set food in front of her without touching her. Clara ate. She did not complain about Winona's silence. She helped with the fire in the morning when she saw what needed doing without being asked. She broke her sticks the right size after watching once. Small things, but small things are the whole of it in the end. By the second week, Winona was looking at her. I was chief. I had been chief for 6 years since my father died of the fever that took a third of our camp that winter. I had not wanted it. If anyone tells you they wanted to be chief, they are either lying or they do not understand what it is. But I had it, the way you have a bad knee, the way you have a brother you did not choose. It was mine and I carried it. Part of what I carried was the watching. I watched everything in my camp, every face, every mood, every tension along the line of a man's shoulders when something was troubling him. I knew who was hungry and who was angry and who was grieving and who was about to do something I would need to talk them out of. This was the actual work. Not the meetings with the Wasichu officials in their hot rooms full of paper, though I did that too. The actual work was the watching and the knowing and the quiet word at the right moment. I watched Clara. She was careful. That was the first thing. Careful the way someone is careful when they know they are on probation, not performing, not trying to charm anyone, just measuring everything before she committed to it. She watched the women the way I watched my camp. She learned how the water was carried, which direction the cook fire faced, how the meat was hung. She did not touch anything that was not offered to her. She was also strong. Not in the way of someone who has not been broken. She had been broken. I could see that. It sat in her at odd angles sometimes, in the way she would go distant in the middle of a conversation, her eyes leaving the present for somewhere else. She had been broken and she was carrying herself carefully anyway, like you carry a cracked vessel, knowing that the crack is there, and moving deliberately so nothing spills. I respected that. I did not say so, but I respected it. About 3 weeks in, the trouble came. His name was Mato Luta, Red Bear, and he was 17 years old and full of the kind of burning that 17-year-old men get when they have seen suffering and have not yet learned what to do with the anger it makes. He was not a bad young man. I want to be clear about that. He was a boy in pain who did not know what to do with his pain, and Clara was something visible and available to aim it at. It happened near the river. She had gone to get water alone. She had started doing things alone, small tasks, testing the edges of what was safe, and he followed her and said things to her that I will not repeat. She walked back to camp without running. She set the water down. She came to me. She told me what happened in plain words, without decoration, and then she stood and waited to see what I would do. I want to tell you that I had a speech ready, that I handled it with some kind of wisdom that smoothed everything over. I did not. I found Mato Luda by the horses, and I took him by the collar of his shirt, and I walked him to a place where no one else could see us, and I talked to him for a long time. What I said was between him and me. Some of it was hard. Some of it, I think, reached him, not because I said it well, but because I meant it. He did not bother her again. What I felt walking away from that was something I had not felt in a long while, maybe years. The feeling of a thing being mine to protect. Not a band of people, not a piece of land, not a principle or a treaty or a way of life, though all of those were mine to protect too, and I felt the weight of them always. Something smaller, one person, her. I did not have a word for it then. I had been a long time without the kind of particularity that comes with one person. My wife had died 7 years before. She had died in the fever year, the same fever that took my father, and she had gone quietly, not the way the stories say. She had just grown lighter and lighter until one morning she was not there. Her name had been Ampitu Y, and I had loved her in the way that you love something you cannot imagine being without, and then I had spent 7 years learning how to be without her. I had learned it. I had set it down. I had understood it was mine now, the long aloneness, and I had made my peace with it, the way you make your peace with a winter that will not end. Clara changed the shape of the winter, not all at once, not in the way of stories. She learned some of my language. Hers was easy for her and mine was not. Lakota is not a language that gives itself up quickly, but she worked at it. She made mistakes and she did not pretend she hadn't made them. She asked me to correct her, which no one asks for, not really, not meaning it. Most people who say correct me when I'm wrong mean something different from what Clara meant, which was, actually correct me, even when it's embarrassing because I would rather know. I corrected her. She laughed at herself when the word came out wrong. Not a performance, just the real laugh of someone surprised by their own stupidity, short and sharp and then done. The first time she made me laugh, she did not know she had. We were walking back from the river in the late afternoon, and she was trying to say the word for the particular angle of that light. There is a word in Lakota for the way fall afternoon light comes in sideways and makes everything look like it's on fire from inside. And it is a word I love. And she had the sounds almost right. And then she said a word that meant something entirely different. Something related to a part of a horse's anatomy that you do not normally discuss. And I made a sound before I could stop it. She looked at me. I told her what she had said. It took a while. I had to demonstrate the word she had meant versus the word she had said, using hand gestures that I realized halfway through were undignified for a man of my position. She laughed so hard she had to stop walking. When she caught her breath, she looked at me and said, "Your face is very serious right now." I told her my face was always serious. She said, "I've noticed, but it's different when you're trying not to smile. Your eyes do a thing." I did not answer that, but I thought about it later. Winter came hard. We had known it was coming. I had seen the signs since September, the way the animals were moving, the way the sky sat heavy on the mountains, and I had prepared as well as I could, laid in as much meat as the hunters could bring, found the best shelter in the valley. But hard is hard. The cold that came in December was the kind that sits in your lungs when you breathe and makes old injuries ache. I kept watch on my people the way I always did, moving through camp in the mornings and evenings, making sure what needed to be done was being done. Clara had become part of what I watched. She had moved by December from Winona's lodge to a small lodge of her own, not because Winona had driven her out, but because it was time, and Winona herself was the one who told her it was time, which meant something I was glad to see. She kept her own fire. She was capable of that now. She kept it the right size, conserved what she had, did not let it run too high or let it die. I checked without checking, the way you do when you do not want to be obvious about what you're checking. One night in January I was going past her lodge and I heard nothing from inside, no sound of the fire, no movement, and I stopped. I told myself it was the cold. People slept heavily in the cold. There was nothing to hear. I stood there. Then I pulled back the flap. She was asleep, but the fire had gone very low, almost out, the kind of low that you do not come back from without attention. The lodge was cold enough that I could see her breath. I crouched and worked the fire back up slowly, feeding it the way you feed something back from the edge, a little at a time, not rushing it. It took a while. I did not make noise. When the fire was right, I looked at her. She had shifted in her sleep, turned toward the heat. Her face in the firelight was, I do not have a better word than plain. Not plain like plain looking. Plain like something uncovered. Like a thing with all its decorations removed, everything it usually presents to the world gone, and what's underneath is just the truth of it. I sat there longer than I should have. Then I left. She found me the next morning at my fire. She stood at the edge of it and said, "You came in last night." I said, "Your fire had gone down." She nodded. There was a pause. She said, "You could have just woken me." I said that she had been sleeping. She looked at me for a moment, just looked. Then she said, "Thank you, Taka Ska." She said my name right, the way I would say it, with the breath in the right place. First time she had gotten the full name right. Spring came slow. The way spring comes in that country, not a break in the cold, more of a loosening, a gradual permission, and with it the first signs of the pressures that would not stop coming. The Wasichu officials had sent word, a meeting at the river fork, the usual meeting, to discuss the usual things, meaning to tell me the things that were going to happen whether I agreed or not. I had been to enough of these meetings to know their texture, to know what was being offered, and what was really being threatened beneath the offer. I went, 4 of my men with me. On the way back, we came through a pass that a Wasichu rancher, a man named Sully, who had been pushing his cattle a little further into our range every season, had started using as his own. There were 3 of his riders there, young men, the kind of young men who use the size of their horse and the conspicuousness of their firearms to have a personality. Words were said, the kind of words that are meant to start something. I have spent 30 years not starting something, not because I was afraid, not because I did not know how to finish what someone else started, because I knew what the finishing looked like on the other side of it for my people. I knew what the stories that came after looked like. I had watched those stories unfold too many times. I looked at Sully's riders. I told them, in a voice I kept very even, that this was not the day for this. We rode past. One of my men, Chaitin, was silent for a long time after. Then he said quietly, I almost did not hear it over the horses, he said, "You are patient, uncle." I told him patience was a different word for the right kind of anger. He thought about that. When I got back to camp, Clara was waiting. Not waiting for me specifically, she was working near the center of camp, doing something with a water bag and sinew. But she looked up when I came through, and something in her face shifted when she saw me. Some small tension released, and I understood she had been keeping track. That mattered to me. I did not examine why, I just carried it. It was May when she came to me and said she needed to tell me something. She said it the way people say something they have been building to for weeks, just a little too direct, the decision already made, the words already chosen. She said, I have been thinking about what you said in January, about the spring trails opening. I had said that the trails would open in spring. I had said it practically, giving her information she might want. I had not said it as a suggestion, but I had maybe said it as a door slightly. Maybe. She said, I could go. To the settlement. I know someone at the trading post would take me north. There are women at the mission in the territories who take in. She stopped, looked at me, started differently. She said, I have been thinking about whether to stay. I did not say anything. She said, I know what I am here. I know it's not easy for your people, for some of them. I know I am something that complicates things, but I have also been thinking about what I would be going back to. My family was on that wagon, all of them, my husband, my daughter. She said my daughter, and something in her voice went the way a thing goes right before it breaks and then holds itself from breaking. She was practiced at the holding. She said, "There is nothing north. There is nothing at the settlement. There is not a thing I am returning to that is mine." I waited. She said, "This is mine, if you'll have it be." There are things men do not know how to answer. There are things that arrive in a shape you have not built a response to, because you did not let yourself expect them. I had spent a long winter not examining what I felt about this woman. I had been useful to her and protective of her and careful around her, and I had given myself no permission beyond that. She looked at me and she was not performing anything. She was not soft-eyed or pleading. She was the way she was, direct and careful and real, asking a real question. I said, "You are not a complication. You have not been a complication. I made a decision about you in a dry wash with nothing to go on but what I could see of you, and what I could see of you was enough. You have been enough." She held that, looked at the fire between us. Then she stood up and came around the fire and she sat beside me, close enough that her shoulder was against my arm, and she did not say anything else. I did not say anything else either. We sat that way for a while, the fire burning down, the camp settling into its evening sounds around us. An owl somewhere in the cottonwoods, a child being called in for the night by her mother, Wagon moving at the picket line. After a while she put her head against my shoulder. I did not move. I let myself have it, this thing I had not let myself expect, and it felt like, I want to say it right, it felt like the river in spring, after the ice goes out, when the water runs clear again and fast and you can hear it. Her hand found my arm and she held it, just held it. I had spent 6 years carrying my people, a good weight but a heavy one. I had been the rock in every storm for 6 years. I had given my steadiness to everyone who needed it, and not looked for anything to hold to in return. Her hand on my arm was small and steady. That is what I remember most when I go back to that evening. Not what she said my name once, just said it the right way, with the breath in the right place. Not the fire, not the owl, not the spring dark coming down on the camp. Her hand holding my arm. Like she knew what she was holding, like she had decided what it was worth. The summer we spent together was not a simple summer. There is no simple anything in the life I led, in the country we lived in the years we were living them. The pressures from the east did not stop. The meetings continued. Sully and his riders continued. The world that was coming did not stop coming because I had found, on a late fall morning in a dry wash, a reason to keep meeting it. But she was there. She was there when I came back from the meetings tired in the way that does not come from the body. She was there in the mornings before the camp woke, sitting by her fire with the look on her face of someone who has learned how to be quiet with herself. She rode out with me sometimes when I went to check the range, and she did not talk unless she had something to say, which is a rarer quality than anyone admits. She had learned enough of my language by August that we sometimes went hours speaking in it. Her mistakes were fewer. Her voice in it sounded different from her voice in her own tongue, slower, more careful, more particular. I told her that once and she said she thought she was a different person in each language. And I said maybe we all are, and she thought about that for a while. Winona liked her by then. Not with warmth the way warmth is usually described. They did not embrace each other, did not share confidences, did not laugh together. They liked each other the way two competent people like each other when they have worked alongside each other and found the other one useful and real. It was the kind of liking I understood better than the other kind. Chayton, who had called me patient, had watched the whole thing unfold with the expression of someone who has been waiting for an adult to see something obvious. When I caught him with that expression one afternoon, I told him If he had something to say, he should say it. He said, "She is good for you, uncle." I told him that was not his assessment to make. He said, "I know, but it's true anyway." He was 17 and he was right, and I let him have it. Fall came again, 1 year since I had found her. I do not know what I believed about things like signs, about the shape of time, about the round quality of certain things that return and return. I had enough life in me to be suspicious of meaning. But I thought about the year. I thought about the morning on the ridge when Wagon had stopped and pulled his ears forward and stood without moving. I went back to that ridge in October, in the early morning by myself. Sat on his back and looked down at the draw. It looked like every other draw, dry, rocky, the cutbank walls the color of old clay, a few scrubby cedars holding on at the edges. I sat there for a while. Behind me, down in the camp, the smoke was rising from the cook fires. The good smoke of morning, carrying the smell of meat and cedar. The sounds of the camp waking horses, children, the percussion of ordinary life. One of those fires was hers. I turned Wagon around and went back down. She was at her fire when I rode in, crouched over it, feeding it the way she had learned to feed it, careful and deliberate, the right size, nothing wasted. She looked up when she heard the horse and she watched me get down and she said, "Early morning ride." I said yes. She said, "Did you go to the ridge?" I looked at her. She said, "I've seen you look at it, the way you look at it, like it's something you go back to in your head." I said yes. She nodded, turned back to her fire. Then she said, without looking up, "I'm glad you came down from it that first morning." I said so was I. She poked at the fire. A log shifted, sent up a thread of sparks. She watched them go. Then she said, "Sit down, taka ska, eat something before the day starts." I sat down. The fire between us was the right size. The smoke went straight up in the still morning air. The camp was waking around us, that good percussion of ordinary life, and she handed me something to eat without ceremony, without looking for anything in return, the way you hand something to a person who belongs at your fire. I ate. The valley was going gold at the edges. The mountains above the tree line had their first snow, just a dusting, the color of old bone. Somewhere behind us a horse shook its head and the bit jingled. She sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her, and we watched the morning come in, and she did not need to say anything else, and neither did I. That is the whole of it, or as much of it as I can give words to. A man does not always have words for the things that matter most. He has the memory of her hand on his arm. He has the particular sound of his name said right. He has the smoke going straight up in the still morning air, and the valley going gold, and a good woman beside him at his own fire. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything.